Well, we are in the midst of investigations right now, and we have set up a joint team, Sweden, Finland and Lithuania, for going through the details of what has happened. So it's too soon to comment on any results based on that. And of course, we have been in close contact with China as well on this.
Well, let's just talk about the fallout then. What has been the impact from these undersea cables being severed?
Well, I guess as applies to Finland and so many other countries as well, that's of course not the only cable we have. There's a lot of critical infrastructure these days between all of our countries. And we just have to focus a lot more on the resilience of the overall connectivity, which is so important, both what comes to data, say, energy infrastructure and all that. So, well, in that sense, there's no huge difference. But of course, if this was a deliberate attack, then it would have also implications for the foreign and security policy.
Minister, I had the pleasure of seeing you when you were in Washington, D.C., and I thought it was a fascinating NATO meeting. It was a NATO meeting which was looking forward to the US election rather than looking back at it, as we will be in Brussels in the coming summer in 2025. How pivotal and how difficult a time is this for NATO and NATO cohesion, given the concerns about what the next administration will do?
Well, to start off, I think we focus too much on sort of the downsides and the challenges that we are facing. Of course, there are a lot of challenges in the world today, but at the same time, NATO is more united than it probably ever has been. And it is truly back to the focus it had right at inception, which is making sure there's not only a very strong transatlantic bond, but also that we focus very strongly on European security and especially the military side of it. I think what happened last summer in Washington was also very pivotal in that respect, that we focused so much also on the hybrid agenda, meaning that we really have to take seriously all these malicious attacks that Russia and other autocratic actors have been enacting on our soil, what comes to basically all countries in Europe and also in the United States.
In terms of how safe Finns feel now that they are, what are you now? You're over a year, considerably over a year, about a year and a half in NATO as well. The Swedes joined at a later date as well. Of course, you previously had, I'm sure, had very close links to NATO. But do you think Finns and the Baltics and the whole region are safer now because of membership of NATO and finally becoming a full member?
Well, of course, the reason Finland and Sweden joined NATO was because we were concerned with the security situation, not just of ourselves, but the entire region and the entire alliance. So we wanted to very much also, of course, benefit from a collective defense, but also very much contribute to that, because we are clearly very strong net contributors to that. And also, what has to be noted, for countries like Finland and Sweden, our geography is nothing new, right? So we have been taking the aggression from Russia very seriously over the course of the years. And certainly Finland, we share the border. So basically there's nothing new, but this is precisely the reason that we have been investing so strongly into our defense prior to joining NATO. And now we are, focusing on that very much as well, and the overall resilience of our societies. And at the same time, we have been, happily building our society, which is, based on the democracy, the rule of law, human rights, and of course, a very attractive business environment as well.
Minister, it was only a couple of weeks ago I was talking to a senior European also living very close to the border who said to me, look, if the war in Ukraine gets solved under President Trump, as he's pledged to do very quickly, then don't think the threat of Russia has gone away, that we'll see a very aggressive state here in other aspects, whether it's around critical infrastructure, whether it's around cyber attacks. What do you think of that? Is there a risk that even if we do get some sort of an arrangement within coming weeks or months, that Russia still poses a significant threat to the West?
Well, the Russian threat, that it was there even before they started the full-scale invasion on Ukraine. And I'm not only speaking about those 10 years prior when they had illegally annexed Crimea and waged war in the eastern parts of Ukraine. Basically, Russia is an autocracy whose ruler, Putin, has declared all sorts of ideas on how he wants to, expand his empire and essentially break international law and, the UN Charter. And of course, we can't have that. It's not just about Ukraine. And I think all these peace talks, we should very much, of course, focus on aiding Ukraine, because Ukraine is fighting not just for European security, but essentially the liberty of the entire world, the UN Charter, which means sovereignty and territorial integrity. But at the same time, we have to realize that the threat that Russia is posing, not only to its citizens, by the way, but the rest of us, it's there, it's prevalent. It was prior to the full-scale invasion there, and it still remains. And therefore, we have to just, build our credible defense and deterrence and hope that Russia goes back to adhering to international law, because certainly who deserve that the most are the Russians themselves.
Minister, how would you describe the next few weeks that are looming at this stage? Because it feels as though both sides have upped the ante, the use of certain weapons, the targeting of energy infrastructure in Ukraine by Russia. It feels as though there's an enormous amount of posturing going on at this stage ahead of what could be any potential negotiation with Trump.
I think it's extremely unfortunate, and I'm lacking words to describe the brutality which Russia has been making use of when attacking not just Ukraine, but essentially Ukrainian people, the civil society, and especially energy infrastructure, simply in order to destroy the livelihood and the possibility to even survive, during a harsh winter. These are brutal war crimes, and of course, there will come a day when all those responsible will come to justice because of this. At the same time, yes, we can see that the intensity of Russian attacks has now been increasing, and Ukraine is somewhat struggling to defend itself, but also holding the defense up very well compared with the fact that Russia, is not adhering to any rules, not even rules of war when it's attacking, and it's also making use of, North Korean soldiers in its effort. But Ukrainians know what they are fighting for, and they are fighting for the liberty and independence of their nation. So in that respect, they are not going to be the losers of this, whatever happens. We just have to make sure that they will have a great future when this comes to an end.
And yet, Minister, and I've been going to Ukraine, for 10 years. I was in Ukraine when the Russians were in Crimea first time as well. The reality is, and I'm going to say two statements here which you probably would disagree with. One, I don't believe the Ukrainians can possibly beat Russia given the current situation. Two, Europe can ill afford a forever war, which has already been going on 10 years as far as Ukrainians are concerned, against the Russians. Surely, even though it would be a bitter pill to swallow, some form of deal in 2025, hopefully brought about by the United States, could well be actually the best scenario for both Ukraine and its medium to long-term future, and indeed for Europe.
Well, I don't disagree that much because, first of all, talking about beating Russia, it wasn't Ukraine in the first place who was attacking Russia, right? So Ukraine is just trying to survive. And what has happened over the course of the past 3 years, and certainly Ukraine started in a very difficult place to start off with. A very poor nation had to, survive in the sphere of Soviet Union, massive corruption for several decades. And now, just 10 years ago, more or less, the people decided that they wanted to have, a future for themselves, freedom based on democracy, the rule of law, and building such a society takes time. But now there's a very strong spirit of, we can do this, and there's an Ukrainian nation that has been basically being built over the course of the past few years. And this certainly is a loss Vladimir Putin. I think we focus too much on just territory. And having said this, of course, territory is massively important because based on the UN Charter, of course, a sovereign nation has the right to territorial integrity. And if we just let go of that, it does not only influence Ukraine, it influences all of the world, and it basically gives all autocratic powers the free card to do whatever they want, just using violence. And I think whatever comes out of this, I am more confident than ever that, again, democracy and freedom, that people have the freedom to choose what they want to do in their lives. That will not just prevail, but that will be even stronger than before.